The chandelier in our rented Beacon Hill apartment seemed to mock me, its crystals scattering fractured light as the sound of his palm connecting with my cheekbone echoed off the high ceilings. It wasn't just the sting, sharp and immediate, but the profound, cavernous shame that bloomed in its wake. My face throbbed, a furious heat that radiated from the point of impact, yet it was the inferno of humiliation being struck by Julian, the man I'd woven into the very fabric of my future, that truly seared. His eyes, usually the warm umber of autumn earth, were glacial, filled with a chilling fury as he grabbed his trench coat and slammed the heavy oak door behind him. The reverberations settled like dust, leaving me in a silence so complete it felt like a tomb. In that moment, the architecture of my life, so carefully constructed, crumbled. His violence was a fault line, and everything had just shifted, irrevocably. My name is Clara Holloway, and I am 26. For 5 years, I'd been entwined with Julian Croft, a man I genuinely believed to be my counterpart, my quiet harbor. He was 27, an architect with a mind as structured as the buildings he designed. We'd become engaged the previous March, in 2023, under a Parisian drizzle that felt cinematic in its perfection. My joy was a tangible thing, a warmth I carried everywhere. Our wedding was slated for April 2024, a nod to the month we'd first stumbled into each other at a dusty antiquarian book fair. Life, I'd thought with a naive certainty, was aligning itself with breathtaking precision. I had no inkling that I was, in fact, charting a course directly into a maelstrom. The thrill of orchestrating our union became my preoccupation. By June 2023, I was immersed in the minutiae, curating an aesthetic of vintage lace and muted blush tones for our anticipated spring nuptials. My laptop screen was a mosaic of curated inspiration boards, fabric swatches, and calligraphic fonts. I'd spend evenings lost in research, sourcing artisanal stationers, florists who specialized in heirloom roses, and boutique caterers. My enthusiastic emails to Julian, filled with links and hopeful queries, were met with a consistent, almost studied, indifference. "Looks elegant, Clara," he'd type back, or sometimes just a cursory thumbs-up icon. I rationalized it, telling myself his demanding project at an international design firm, Aperture Global, consumed him, that he trusted my aesthetic implicitly. A more perceptive woman might have recognized the dissonant chord, the subtle tremor of disengagement. Julian's detachment wasn't confined to wedding logistics. His mother, Mrs. Eleanor Croft, was a formidable, almost spectral presence in our lives. Julian, her only child, was bound to her by an invisible, yet unyielding, filial devotion. Initially, I'd viewed their closeness as endearing, a testament to his capacity for loyalty. But her influence, I came to realize, was less a gentle guidance and more a pervasive, suffocating fog. He'd consult her multiple times daily, on matters ranging from portfolio choices to which tie best suited a client, meeting decisions that, increasingly, felt like they should have been ours alone. I often felt like an interloper in my own relationship, a satellite orbiting their dyad. The truth, stark and uncomfortable, was that I was in a silent, undeclared contest for his primary allegiance. Still, I clung to the hope that marriage would recalibrate his priorities. I could not have been more catastrophically mistaken. 2 weeks ago, an event I'd anticipated with girlish fervor finally arrived, selecting my wedding gown, accompanied by my mother and my sister, Sophie. It was meant to be a luminous memory. We drifted through several hushed, elegant salons in the Back Bay, silk and tulle whispering around us. And then I saw it. An ethereal creation of French Alsace lace over champagne silk, with a bateau neckline that hinted at old-world grace. As I stood before the triptych mirror, the reflection was not just me, but a bride, poised on a threshold. Tears welled, blurring the image. My mother and Sophie murmured their approval, their faces alight. Eager to share the moment, I texted Julian a photograph. "Exquisite, Clara." "Truly," he replied. A fragile bubble of happiness expanded in my chest. I didn't know he'd almost instantaneously forwarded the image to Eleanor, triggering a cascade of events that would shatter my carefully constructed dream. Eleanor, my prospective mother-in-law, upon viewing the gown, became incandescent with rage. Her calls came in a furious barrage while I was still navigating the city traffic, but I let them go to voicemail, assuming it was a minor query. Arriving home later, buoyant and hopeful, I stepped into a drastically altered atmosphere. Eleanor had used her emergency key to let herself into our apartment. She was seated rigidly on our Chesterfield sofa, her posture radiating an icy displeasure that instantly extinguished my joy. She rose as I entered, her voice a shard of glass. "You deceived me, Clara." Bewildered, I asked for clarification. She claimed I had, years prior, solemnly promised to wear her wedding dress, a garment from the late 1970s, its style anachronistic, its fabric yellowed, frankly more suited to a costume exhibit. I was dumbfounded. I had no memory of such a vow. Perhaps a polite, throwaway comment made in youthful deference, but a binding pact? Never. Eleanor, however, was impervious to reason. She branded me a liar, unfit to marry her son. Her words were like acid. I searched the apartment desperately for Julian, for a sign of his support, but he was conspicuously absent. My attempts to placate Eleanor only fueled her tirade. Her voice escalated, accusations sharpened. Eventually, overwhelmed, I retreated to our bedroom, the sound of her fury seeping under the door. After what felt like an age, the front door slammed. Julian entered our room moments later, affecting an air of bewildered innocence regarding his mother's agitation, as if he hadn't been lurking somewhere within earshot. A tide of disbelief washed over me. I recounted the entire episode, expecting, needing his solidarity. Instead, he aligned himself with Eleanor, meticulously constructing a defense for her. He claimed that early in our courtship, I had apparently admired her gown and expressed a wistful desire to wear something so timeless. A polite murmur, perhaps, stretched on the rack of his memory into a sacred pledge. He insisted I was being insensitive, that Eleanor's feelings were valid. I went to bed that night feeling utterly adrift, a profound ache of disappointment settling in my heart. Sleep offered no solace. I lay there, replaying Eleanor's accusations, Julian's betrayal. The man I'd pledged my life to had prioritized his mother's revisionist history over my distress. A cold dread began to crystallize within me. I thought of every concession made, every family event prioritized over my own needs. For what? To be cast as a pariah in my own impending marriage. The morning brought a fresh assault, a barrage of text messages from Eleanor, each one a meticulously crafted barb. She painted me as conniving, unappreciative, unworthy of her cherished Julian. Tears of helpless anger pricked my eyes. I showed the messages to Julian, hoping the venom in her words would finally pierce his filial loyalty. He waved them away. "She's merely heard about the dress, Clara. She'll come around." His dismissiveness was staggering. Eleanor wasn't hurt, she was waging a campaign to undermine me. This was no longer about a piece of antique satin, it was about fundamental respect, about partnership. And Julian, it was becoming excruciatingly clear, was not my partner in this. I tried to reason with him, explaining that the choice of a wedding dress was deeply personal, an expression of self on a pivotal day. I even proposed compromises, incorporating a piece of Eleanor's veil into my own, wearing a family heirloom of hers. But it was futile. Julian remained intractable, insisting that wearing the entirety of her gown was the only acceptable course, lest I be perceived as ungrateful. It was an ultimatum, and I felt myself being slowly erased from the equation of my own wedding. The ensuing days were a crucible of tension. Eleanor continued her offensive, her disparaging remarks now subtly seeding doubt amongst mutual acquaintances. Julian offered no intervention. Instead, he seemed to absorb her perspective, his demeanor increasingly accusatory, making me question my own sanity for wanting the autonomy to choose my wedding attire. Then came the moment the earth gave way. The atmosphere between Julian and me was so charged it felt combustible. I knew a definitive conversation was unavoidable, one that would likely determine the viability of our future. I waited for him to return from his office one evening, resolved to make him understand the precipice upon which we stood. In the dim light of our living room, I laid bare my hurt, my feeling of profound isolation, his mother's relentless interference. I reminded him this was our wedding, not a stage for Eleanor to relive her past. Instead of empathy, Julian became defensive. "You're catastrophizing, Clara," he retorted. "This is about family. The wedding isn't solely for us, it's for them too." His words were a cold shock. I asked, my voice trembling, "Julian, are you marrying me, or are you merely extending your mother's reign?" That question was the spark. His face contorted, a mask of sudden fury. He began to shout, accusing me of selfishness, of manufacturing drama. The pain of his dismissal was acute. I told him I was profoundly reconsidering our engagement, that I couldn't marry a man who wouldn't champion me, even against his own family. He scoffed, treating my anguish as a childish outburst. His indifference was a fresh wound. I turned to leave, to escape the escalating vortex of the argument. That's when he grabbed my arm, spinning me around. Then, the unthinkable. His hand arced through the air. The crack of impact was a brutal punctuation mark, silencing the room, silencing me. A searing pain bloomed on my cheek, less from the physical blow than the venom of betrayal. He'd struck me. Julian, my Julian, had struck me. Tears, hot and immediate, blurred my vision. He wrenched open the door and was gone, the slam reverberating through the apartment, a final, violent severing. The silence he left behind was a chasm, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the man I had loved, the future I had envisioned, had just been irrevocably shattered. My fingers, shaking, found my phone. I called Sophie. She arrived within 20 minutes, her expression shifting from concern to horrified fury when she saw the angry crimson brand on my cheek. Her embrace was a fortress. "You're not staying here another night," she stated, her voice firm with a resolve that mirrored my own dawning clarity. Together, we hastily packed an overnight bag. Leaving the apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like escaping a beautifully appointed prison. My relationship with Julian was a ruin, and a grim determination to protect myself began to take root. The next morning, with Sophie's unwavering presence beside me, I walked into the precinct on Tremont Street and filed for an emergency protective order. I presented photographs of my bruised cheek and the sheaf of Eleanor's vitriolic messages. The process was surreal, a grim ballet of paperwork and stark realities. Canceling the wedding arrangements was the next agonizing step. The event manager at the historic Omni Parker House, our chosen venue, listened with unexpected compassion, allowing me to repurpose our substantial deposit for a future event I decided, in a moment of defiant self-reclamation, on an extravagant 30th birthday celebration for myself. The caterer was less understanding. I forfeited nearly $7,000. The engagement ring, a bespoke sapphire and diamond piece from a Newberry Street jeweler, valued at around $15,000, felt like a lead weight. Julian, in a rare moment of contact, refused its return. I sold it to a reputable estate dealer and donated the entire sum to a Cambridge-based shelter for women fleeing domestic violence. It was a small act of alchemy, transmuting pain into purpose. Eleanor, undeterred by the restraining order against her son, launched a vicious smear campaign across various social platforms, painting me as a capricious gold digger. Julian oscillated between desperate, tearful pleas for reconciliation and bitter, accusatory voicemails. He even appeared at my temporary lodgings with Sophie, a wraith-like figure of contrition, until the threat of a police call compelled his retreat. It only solidified my resolve. My parents, when they learned the full extent of Julian's actions and Eleanor's machinations, were incandescent with a protective fury. They facilitated my move from the Beacon Hill apartment and offered to absorb any legal costs. Some friends were anchors of support, others, swayed by Eleanor's narrative or simply uncomfortable with the schism, drifted away. One unexpected communiqué arrived, a brief, dignified note from Julian's estranged father, Arthur Croft, offering a quiet apology for his family's conduct and wishing me peace. It was a small, unexpected grace. The 30th birthday gala, held at the Omni Parker House on what would have been my wedding day, was not a somber affair, but a vibrant celebration of resilience, surrounded by those who had stood by me. Laughter and music filled the grand ballroom, a testament to reclaimed joy. Sophie and I repurposed the honeymoon fund for a trip to Florence. Wandering through the Uffizi, sharing gelato by the Arno, we forged new memories, sisterly bonds strengthening in the Italian sun. It wasn't the romantic idyll I'd once planned, but it was profoundly healing. Back in Boston, I committed to therapy. Unpacking the layers of emotional manipulation, the erosion of my self-worth, was arduous. Dr. Evans, my therapist, gently guided me through the wreckage, helping me identify the red flags I'd minimized, the compromises that had cost me too dearly. Julian and Eleanor eventually receded, their attempts at contact ceasing after the protective order was finalized. People sometimes inquire if I harbor regrets. I don't. The ordeal, though excruciating, was a crucible. It taught me the steel of my own spine, the necessity of unwavering self-respect, and the non-negotiable value of genuine partnership. I am not yet seeking new love, but I am no longer afraid of it. For now, I am rediscovering Clara Holloway, her passions, her quiet strengths, her capacity for joy. The future, once a meticulously mapped constellation, is now an open sky, vast and full of unwritten stars. And for the first time in what feels like an eternity, I am eager to navigate it.